Welcome back. We're coming towards the end of our day. Sarah Maxwell, she goes by Sarah J as well. I'm going to introduce here in just a minute. Carla, Mark, any last things you'd like to share? Because we're going to do Sarah, and we're going to be with her for here probably about 20 minutes or so, 23 minutes. We'll kind of come back and finish it off and conclude that as part of the day. Maybe before we do so, I'd like to invite everybody, go to the website if you haven't already done so. And I'm going to kind of go back to the top here, and I want to show everybody, if you haven't been to our website, if you're there and you can come through to this as you're looking at part of what the event schedule is and everything else, notice that you can go ahead and click right here on the links for YouTube, for Instagram, and Facebook. We're going to recommend that you go through and follow us. I like kind of showing that on our main YouTube channel here. There's this option, if you haven't, to go ahead and subscribe, and then you can hit that bell to be notified when new videos come out and they're available for you to see. And then again, at the very top, enter to win. We still have plenty of giveaways. We have 2 more full streaming days that will be providing giveaways and doing giveaways with that. So I wanted to bring that up as one last shout out as we kind of conclude part of this session before we move to Sarah and before we call it part of a day. Again, if you haven't, invite friends. If you have a quilt guild, hey, we would love you to send them a link. Invite them to come and view. Next week, we're going to do more giveaways throughout the entire live event. We've got that same process happening for those that are streaming with us also next week, Tuesday, and then next week, Friday. So again, thank you very much with that. And Carla and Mark, thank you again for all your help as you've been with us here today. And again, we thank you for all of your viewers. With this, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to introduce Sarah. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to let you see a little bit more regarding her information, and we'll read her, what we're going to be seeing from her right now. So quickly, I thought we'd kind of look through this for you. This one is her talking about encoding a message into your quilt design. And I'm not sure if you've seen some of her information, but she has a fun way of creating some additional information and insights on the quilt. And so that's what this is about. Sarah is a very well-known fabric designer. She designs fabrics, she designs patterns. She does a lot of other things besides that. It's been wonderful to know her. We're super appreciative of her being able to be with us and participate in this fantastic fall festival.
Hello, Grace Quilting friends. I'm so excited to be with you today as part of the Grace Quilt Festival. You know, 2020 has been such an unusual year, and we're all missing the connection that we find when we gather at quilt shows, at our favorite quilt shops, and at other events. So Grace Quilting is bringing you this fabulous online event so we can reconnect with each other, and I'm glad to be part of it. I'm going to talk to you today about my journey as a quilter and about projects that are featured in 2 of my books, Morse Code Quilts and Fearless with Fabrics. My talk overall is about how we code messages into quilts and a way that I discovered to do that with the Morse code technique. So let's get started. You know, I've been a quilter for many years, and I think as most quilters, I turned to quilting as a creative outlet and a way to find, to express meaning to people in my gifts. I love the idea of giving something that they would keep for a long time that had some message or had a way to convey the love that I felt for friends and family. And early on in my quilting, I started working with memory quilts. I would take things left behind by loved ones who had passed on and incorporate those into a quilt. And one of the projects that I did for my own family was this quilt made from my dad's shirts. And as you can see, it's just a traditional block. He loved plaid shirts, and so I cut apart all the shirts and sashed them together with something that reminded me of the denim that he loved to wear, his blue jeans. And the quilting on this incorporated a lot of country and western themes because he loved country music. And so there's cowboy boots and cactuses and all the things that reminded me of him. And this was gifted to a family member in his memory. And it was my first foray into really finding a way to include a message in a quilt. Now, I did very traditional quilting for many years. If you followed along with some of our Fearless with Fabric journey on the Grace Quilting website, you might have seen this project, which was called Just Squared, and it's actually available as a free pattern download on my website. You can find the link and all of the info at gracequilting.com. But this kind of a very traditional quilt is what I was known for many years. I loved working with reproduction fabrics. Here's another example, just a nice reproduction fabric line in a frame churn dash. And I cannot tell you how many quilts I have like this that I've made over the years. Here's another table runner. This features some just pretty kind of traditional country style fabrics. And so I had a whole bunch of this type of quilt, and I have two daughters. And they both went away in the same year. One went to college about 600 miles away, and the oldest daughter moved to California, which is thousands of miles away from where I live in the Midwest. And like any quilting mom, I assumed that they were going to take lots of my quilts with them to decorate their home, and so they would have a piece of me there. And I discovered, to my great surprise, that neither one of them really liked the style of quilting I did. They didn't like these traditional fabrics or darker colors or really busy quilts. And so I was really upset for a little bit. And then I thought, how can I translate my quilting into something that my daughters would love and that hopefully would resonate with other people if they were in the same boat as me? So I started studying modern quilting. And my way of study is to just research a lot. I bought some books about modern quilting. I started reading blogs. I started following people on social media. And I discovered a few principles about modern quilting that I incorporated in another memory quilt that I made for my dad. But this one was for me. And let me show you in my book, I talk about this one a little bit, and I show what a traditional version of this quilt would be. Let me find it here. So I wanted to use all of my existing patchwork knowledge and decide how to translate that into something that would feel more modern. And so if you can see here, this is the reverb quilt, and this was the traditional version using a Jack's chain block. And I knew I wanted to incorporate the blue that I mentioned earlier. He always wore denim. And I grew up at Lake of the Ozarks, so water had a lot of significance for me with my dad. And as I translated that block, I started with the block. And then as you can see, one of the major design elements with modern quilting is negative space. So I incorporated blank areas in this. I didn't set a whole series of these blocks side by side. Instead, I opened up the design. And as you can see, if you can see all the way to the bottom of this, the block trails off. So this signified to me the message that Dad had been on this earth, and then over time, as he faded away, the blocks get significantly smaller. And he's always here though, and so the name of the quilt, Reverb, I wanted to show with some water quilting, pebbles that would line the lake shore. And so this was one of my first attempts at creating a message that was apparent to me, maybe not apparent to anyone else, but a meaningful way to commemorate someone that wasn't the old traditional cut up the clothing. So this quilt pattern is in my book, Fearless with Fabric, Fresh Quilts from Traditional Blocks. And I talk at length about how to incorporate modern design elements in that book. Now, as I continued to study modern quilting, one of the things that my youngest daughter had told me was she loved solid fabrics and bold statements. And so that was a real transition for me because I had historically only worked with print fabrics. I love all the prints on the market, and so I could never really understand why a person would work with solids. To me, they seemed a little boring. But I wanted to make a quilt that she would love, so I did a lot of research, as I mentioned, on modern design elements, and that recurring theme was solid fabric, negative space, and simple design. And as I was trying to figure out how to send a message to her, because I liked messages in my quilt, even if they were only apparent to me, I got to thinking about Morse code. And Morse code, as you may know, is a series of dots and dashes that represent letters. And so my book, Morse Code Quilts, I mathematically graphed out how to represent these dots and dashes in a technique that translates to fabric. And I created this quilt for her. I don't have it with me anymore. It lives with her, but I'll show you the picture here. And so this quilt was created for Shannon, and it has a message. And I finished this just about the time that the QuiltCon applications were open. And I thought, maybe this is something that really will appeal to modern quilters. And I wanted to test the idea. Had I designed something that was really modern? And so this quilt was juried into QuiltCon several years ago. And it says, "To the moon and back, love, Mom." So it had a hidden message in there that was only apparent to me, but I knew as I sent it off to her in college that she would be covered with a message from her mom. That quilt has been very popular. I've actually made it now a few times for other people in our family that I love. And I actually made it again for Shannon in a new color palette to match her new apartment. So if you have someone that you would like to send that kind of message to, I encourage you to pick up the book Morse Code Quilts, because you could either make that quilt, some of the other quilts I'm going to show you, or you could learn how to code your own quilt. So the next quilt that I wanted to do with this messaging was a project for my sister. Once I started coding, I thought, look at all the things I can do. So the cover quilt here, I do actually have. And this quilt says, "Love is love." And this was for my sister, Kathy. And I reinforced the message of this quilt by using a rainbow approach to the color. So each component of a letter is a different color. And as I mentioned, it says, "Love is love." And if you can see close up on the quilting, each of the little color blocks has the word love in it. So that is another way to bring the message of your quilt to life. You can quilt actual things within the word blocks that send the message. Or you can just keep it a secret if you like to know and have other people wonder kind of what the message is. So the Morse code technique takes that grid that I showed you of the letters and numbers and converts that to a mathematical formula where you can graph out messages of your own. And it works from those small quilts like the Love is Love quilt I just showed you, all the way up to a king size quilt. This is a quilt in the book, again, doesn't live with me, but this was for my other daughter, and this was a wedding quilt that commemorated her wedding day. And it actually says, "And so the adventure begins, Megan and Tyler and their wedding date." So you can use this technique to create quilts that have dates that commemorate any kind of event. Graduations are great for this, birthdays, births of a baby. You can incorporate names. You can do a lot of different things with this technique. So I encourage you to check it out. I want to show you a few of the other quilts in the book and show you how they can look really different based on fabric choice. So one of the quilts that I put in the book, because I thought I needed just kind of a generic message quilt, and this says Hugs. And it's in classic K fabrics, which everyone loves. So Hugs, Hugs. And this is about 30 inches square. So this is a great project if you've got someone who's sick that you want to send a little encouragement to. If you just have someone that could use a hug. Super fast to make. The pattern is in the book. And I want to show you how different it can look. So that was a multicolor background. This one, the background's a little more solid, but still very modern fabrics. And then I also did it in a more masculine version with just tonal fabrics. And one last one, totally neutral, just so you can see how different these look. So this is a really fun project that you can whip up literally in a weekend. If you own a long arm, a Grace Unique, or the Q-Zone, you could quilt this in a day as well. I mean, this is something you could give someone with really no long time investments. So they're great gifts because you can feel good about it, but you can get it done really quickly. Something else that I wanted to do with the technique, some words are just really long in Morse code. The letter O, for example, takes up a lot of space because of the number of dashes that it has. So sometimes if you're trying to figure out how to fit a message in, normally we would go horizontal in writing, but with this quilt, I just wanted to play around, and this quilt, the letters are vertical. And so this one spells out peace, and so the P is there, and then the E, and then ACE, vertical. And this was just one I wanted to play around with the technique, and I liked the fabric. This is from one of my fabric lines, so I just wanted to play with the colors. But another fun project that would be a great gift size, this could be a table topper or a wall hanging. Another thing that I wanted to do with the technique was consider holiday projects. And I don't know about you, but I hate to make something that's only good for a really short time window. I like to celebrate Christmas, but I love to have Christmas decor that lasts more than just a couple of weeks. So first, I made a table runner that says snow using a very obvious Christmas fabric with the candy canes. And one thing I wanted to show on this, so it's SNOW. One thing I wanted to show you on this, this was a really busy candy cane fabric that I loved, but I wasn't sure how to use it. And so it really suited itself to being the background of a project like this, where you can interrupt it with the letters that are in a near solid and have something that would be fun to put out on your table. But if you want a little decor that lasts a little longer than just the couple of weeks around Christmas, then this was an option I came up with. This says Merry, and so it's MERRY. And I put a gray background paired with red, so I could keep this out longer. I could keep this out, in through January, February if I wanted to. One thing that you can see here, and this kind of illustrates the design issue that you'll have to work with in planning Morse code quilts, the letter E is a single dot. These are dashes, these are dots, so MERRY. You can see that Y takes up some space as well. I mentioned O was really long. Y is one of the longer letters too. So as you're planning things out, you have to come up with a way to balance the space. And I did that just by incorporating a little more negative space on the sides of the quilt. But this is a fun table runner you could easily whip up for the holidays. There'd still be time to make it even for this holiday season if you have some fabric on hand and want to grab the book. One of the other quilts that I wanted to do, because I really view this technique as something that any of us could use to send a message to someone in need, and that is this quilt. And this says, "Love you more." So love you more. Lot of negative space, as you can see. So I had made this for someone who loves the color orange. I used a near solid. If you can see the fabric, it is a little speckle because I still don't always love pure solid fabrics, but something that's a near solid can work. And this is a really easy baby quilt if you've got a new arrival coming, or if you're sending someone off to college, or you just want to send a message to someone that they can wrap up on the couch with. Kind of a universal message of love that anyone would be able to use. I want to talk to you about a few quilts in my other book as well. So this is Fresh Quilts from Traditional Blocks, Fearless with Fabric. And as I worked through some of these concepts, I realized that I wanted to share a lot of what I've learned as a traditional quilter that I've now incorporated into more modern techniques. And so this has 14 different projects that showcase a lot of my new approach to working with blocks. And I've got one here I wanted to show you. Let me show you the picture in the book because it's hard to show several of these quilts. They're so big. So this is called Shazam. Let's see if we've got... And I started this project with this block, if you can see that. Very traditional block with the peaky and spike rectangles. And I started thinking, how else could I arrange the patches in that block to create something new? And the result was Shazam. And this is one of my favorite quilts. It is very large. Here's what the individual block looks like. And then the quilt spaces these blocks out in a color progression, and I didn't make the rows all the way across. I kind of echoed that Shazam shape across the body of the quilt, and then used a really wavy, irregular, modern wave kind of quilting pattern on this. Sarah Beth Reed does a lot of my quilting for me, and she did this one and just really did an exceptional job. And the Shazam block is a lot of fun. If you don't want to commit to that large quilt, here's a little wall hanging version, and you can see the whole quilt. And just, again, incorporated negative space, left a row of blocks out, just so it had a little open and airier feel. So that is a highlight of some of my projects using the Morse code technique and finding ways to incorporate messages in quilts. I hope you've been intrigued with something and want to make one of your own. You can find my books on my website, designsbysarahj.com. I invite you to reach out if you've got questions about this. I'm always happy to help people. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the Grace Quilting Festival. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Sarah Maxwell. She does a wonderful job. It's been super fun to be able to work with her again. And thank you for all your efforts and your initiatives. And then Sarah is part of what that's concerned. And then everybody else who's participated today, thank you very much for all your time, your efforts. Those who are visiting with us and who are streaming with us, thank you for streaming with us as well. It's been wonderful. It's been fun. We hope to see you, and we hope to have you come back next Thursday. So we'll be streaming next week on next week on Tuesday. Well, so next week on Tuesday, and then we're going to also do next week on Friday. So we have 2 full streaming days next week with some insights that'll be coming up. As part of these next couple events, we have a couple other interviews that we were able to participate with. We are going to have panels. We're going to have additional information and instructions. Leah Day will be with us again in her 3rd series on part of her basket weave. Again, super excited. Again, appreciate everybody who's had a chance to participate. Those who've joined our live show and have helped share content. Thank you for those who've been streaming. We really do, again, appreciate that. Please make sure to continue to leave comments if you have those as we continue to move throughout the rest of the evening. And then and come back. And I'm going to, again, encourage you to go try that, the Trick or Treat treasure hunt on the site. So if you go to the Fantastic Fall Festival, and you can see that there's some information on there, so a couple rules. But if you browse the quilts and you're doing so, you'll notice that over the next few days, we're going to give away several different prizes for those people who are viewing and sharing and participating in that process again. So thanks, everybody. We have enjoyed all of what we've done today. We look forward to seeing you again next week.